I've planed it, and planing is difficult and I'm not very good at it. Self-taught, but I didn't do too badly. I only made a couple of bad dings in the edges, but there's still a few sort of holes and things because this was a bit of repurposed board. So I'm just filling it with the filler, this sculpting tool, but it's actually best to do most of it with your fingers. And there's a couple of old screw holes. Don't know what this board was once used for. It's going to take 2 fills and then some light sanding, and then I'll paint it. About another week has passed, and this has had 2 coats now of black acrylic paint. I wish I'd have used something like black masonry paint. Probably from where you are looking on from the camera at this this black backdrop behind it, probably looks okay, but close up it's not so good. I had planned to paint it with some special paint that I was buying from eBay. I've long had bookmarks on there a bottle of something called Stuart Semple 2.0, which is supposed to be one of these blacker than black paints, and I think it's like a sort of meant to be like a sort of Vanta black type thing, although that's not generally available to the public. I don't know if maybe only NASA can buy it or something. It's the stuff they use to paint the inside of telescopes, but it's meant to be a black that will almost disappear. That's going to be used to paint the stem. The pitter-pattering noise you can hear is my dog, who knows I'm going to step towards the camera in a moment and has decided to try and trip me up if he can. I'm going to paint the stem, or at least the part of the stem that's going to be visible, and it's going to support the whole floating structure, about a foot of it. And I hope that I would have enough left over to do a top coat on the base, but when it came, there it is. The reason it looks invisible is because it's so small. That's what it looks like next to a standard Vallejo paint bottle. So there is a lesson to check quantities and sizes of things that you buy from eBay. Otherwise, when you think you're buying a nice armchair, you end up with something for a doll's house. The other reason that I've not done very much on it the last week is I'm a bit stuck for thinking space. The stem that's going to support the whole building, don't quite know how to rig it so that the building is not going to slump. If I fix the building onto it with glue, almost all glues have a time. They might go after a couple of months or a year or 2 years, maybe 10 years, but many things sort of collapse into entropy when they're only fixed together with glue. So I'm having to decide whether or not to drill holes through this, I think it's aluminium rod. Still trying to decide whether or not to fill it with resin to make it a bit stronger. And if I'm going to put thin rods or wires or something through it by drilling holes, that will weaken the structure, I guess. And I'm not sure exactly where I'm going to want to put them in relation to the floors. And all those things have put me in a bit of a dither, a bit of a indecision. So definitely going to have to start deciding on that and doing something this weekend. I found these rods. I can't remember what they're from. They're just something left over from something years and years ago that I kept. Measured them with calipers. They're 3 millimeters in diameter. They're rather thicker and stronger than coat hanger wire. They're not going to bend easily. Drilled a hole in the aluminium tube with my trusty Dremel tool, and then one of those rods one is slightly longer. We'll go through that hole. And then I don't know if I want to put another one in at right angles to that, slightly above it or slightly below it, or if I want to drill holes at the same point and cut one of the rods in half and glue it into place. But I'll do something like that. It'll make a rather spiky and look like a medieval weapon for a while. I'll be very careful not to poke my eyes out with it when I'm transporting it. Right, Jesmonite resin, which is a liquid and a powder, which you mix together in the right proportions. You try and get rid of some of those bubbles, and that's going to be poured into the tube, which is sealed up with sellotape at one end, and the little holes and gaps around where those rods are has been sealed up with plastiline temporarily. I'm going to pour the resin into there. The tube's now full of resin. The crossbars are in place. It's a rather dangerous, spiky, ugly looking thing at the moment. And I've hammered it into the hole in the baseboard through to the little block underneath. Added a little bit of glue for good measure. And now a sheet of black core foam board is going on. It's got a hole where I think the best place for that sort of supporting column is going to be, and I've just marked on where the ground floor of the building, which is, you remember, has got a separate bit the other side of the ginnel, is going to go, and that's going to be the floor level. What I've forgotten about is the fact that I wanted that floor level to be offset, but it's fine because my two crossbars are at slightly different levels. So I'm going to cut a line in here, and then I'm going to tilt it so that this side is below the spars and glued to them, and this side is above, so it will be at a slight sloping down to the left configuration. I've made some progress. I've glued on some spars. Need a bit of reinforcement yet, but there are some spars under that baseboard and onto the main support. There's going to be a longer stretch that I'm going to paint with that blackest of black paint. Is protected. The board underneath is protected from splatters. At the moment, the upper layers, well, at least the first 4 layers, are just hickledy-pickledy piled on to give me a rough idea of how it's going to work. And I've had another couple of thoughts which give me more decisions to make. In the underground part of the rock, I'm certainly going to have one entrance, which will be a smuggler's tunnel or an entrance to a dungeon or something that's been ripped out of the earth. And the other thing I'm going to put on is a cesspool, an overflowing cesspool. I think it'd be quite fun to have this teleporting into your town or village, and what would happen if you ripped a huge building out of the ground in a city and started moving it about the place in a magical fashion. Well, its plumbing would generally be something of an issue. How I'm going to do it, I don't know. I've got to make some decisions. I was thinking something like papier, putting the leftover chunks of foam under there, or putting in some more spars and doing it all with paper mache strips to go round. It's all going to have to be done upside down, though. I can't really invert it. I might have to find a way of doing that, but I don't yet know how. And this, what I'm using here is it's a construction adhesive, but it's instant grab adhesive. It's not exactly instant, but it can be used for sticking plasterboard up onto ceilings and things. It holds it long enough for the glue to set if what it's holding is reasonably light. I may have to deploy quite a lot of that in order to fill in this this area that's going to look solid, at the same time trying to keep it as light as possible. This is my leftover foam, and it looks like an awful lot, but I think actually it's probably enough rather than too much. And what I'm left with is lots of rather small pieces, rather irregular small pieces, and I've taken a few to I have to stretch with my hands now to show you, just to approximate the top floor, which is this attic floor, to make sure I've reserved enough. And then I have one piece that's big enough to almost fill a quadrant of the bedrock, and I've actually had fun with that. I think you can see just this is where the hot knife has come into its own, just by cutting, moving my hand as I guide the knife blade through quite slowly, and then snapping and breaking lumps away. You can see there where I've cut in, and then I'll break away, and it's giving me some nice shattered rock textures, and that piece will just fit in beautifully in there. I'm rather pleased with that. Unfortunately, it's not quite enough to fill all the available space, and these other quadrants will have to be built up with lots of individual bits. But this is a rather enjoyable part of the task, and I'm going to enjoy figuring out a way to get some sort of subterranean stairs and a tunnel somehow carved into that. Don't know whether to try and carve in or just whack a big hole and sort of build some stairs. I'm enjoying this stage of the project. More than 2 weeks have passed since I was last able to do any work at all on the project. This is a couple of things have happened in the meantime though, so just to tell you about those. One is that I cut the tube. This is just over half of the original, and I've calculated it to fit into the maximum proportions that I'll be able to use for submitting this to an art exhibition, because there's limits on things like that. And even though that's 8-9 months ago, I need to make sure I don't end up making something that's too big to transport, and certainly don't want to make something that's too big to get into the exhibition. And this is how it will fit. Just about a span of it will be the foundation of the tower, and the rest going up almost to the ceiling of this room. But the big problem is that I've realised, now I've cut it, that it's too heavy. It must weigh, as an estimate, perhaps 3 or 4 pounds, and that is probably significantly more than the whole rest of the structure. It's probably a good way to being half the heaviness of the base, but that will put too much strain on the tube that's going to be supporting the whole weight, and if that bends, it's not going to look like something that can magically fly through air. I'm disappointed because this was the tube I got on Freegal and I really wanted to use it. So I'm going to use it anyway, but not in its final form. I'm going to somehow have to figure out a way of using it as a former. I'm going to wrap thin card around it, and then a layer of bricks, and put some stiffeners in it. So, although it won't actually be in the final model, it will be, if you like, the scaffolding that's been it's going to be used to make that tower. And the second problem is that one of the other distractions I got onto was trying to make a portal using a water mister, and while I was trying to get that working, a lot of water mist that settled all over the work surface, and it went underneath some paints and all sorts of other junk, because I always work in a very cluttered situation. And I discovered that I had left something on the work surface that really didn't want to get wet, and I found it about 10 minutes later. It's the bits of paper that I had pinned to my easel with things you're doing wrongly and a list of essential elements, things I didn't want to miss out. Having dried the bits of paper out and reassembled them, most of it's legible. I've lost my picture of the tower. I can't work out what that 5th sheet is. I may have to look back through the video clips I've assembled for this video series so far and actually try to work out what I was talking about. Though it's good in a way. It will remind me to go back and actually study my notes, see what I've missed out so far. I've made a little staircase, and this is bad practice really, because it's concentrating on fiddly detail when the main structure, I haven't even finished all the roughing out the main layers yet, but it's meant to be a bit of fun as well. So I had the temptation to make a little staircase that's exposed, because it's a subterranean staircase that's now been ripped free of the earth, and I carving it into the foam would be difficult, maybe impossible, so I'm actually building it out of black foam core board, and then I will cut roughly a hole. It hasn't got to be a whole staircase, it's only got to be enough for you to see the bottom of the staircase and see it turning and going round up out of view. And I just did it by checking with my little figure for scale to get the sort of minimum width. It might be like a secret staircase or an escape passage or something, and cutting a little piece with an angle of 15 millimeters, and then I cut one that's twice the size of that, so it's got a 30 millimeters, and then I just added the 15 millimeter one to the 30 millimeter one and kept adding the 15 millimeters to each piece, and just drawing around it with a pen that stands out on the black background, and then cutting them out to assemble the staircase. And then it will be stuck together with styro goo, maybe PVA actually, because this is actually paper to paper, and then it'll be somehow worked into the base rock.